I believe one of the traits to be the type of leader you and I are talking about is, and every person I interviewed, every executive said the same thing, is
Yeah.
asking questions. And think about what she said. How do you run it? That was a question.
Yeah.
How do we run the business? And asking questions of your people, well, it's smart as heck, first off, because you may think you have all the answers, you don't. There is
Sure.
something that Lindsay knows that I don't know, that if I knew, we'd be better off.
Three things you will learn from this episode today. Number one, why generosity is a leadership advantage. Number two, how to turn feedback into fuel. And number three, why the best leaders aren't the loudest. Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. What do you get when you combine 37 years at Boston Consulting Group, a co-founder of the DC office, a two-time board chair of his alma mater, and a man who is just as devoted to family dinners as he is to Fortune 500 strategy? You get Joe Davis, senior partner emeritus at Boston Consulting Group and author of The Generous Leader. And this is one of my favorite topics. Joe's legacy isn't just about titles, though he's racked up plenty. It's about building businesses, building people, and building cultures where generosity isn't a soft skill, it is a superpower. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lindsay. That is by far the best intro I've ever heard. Thank you very much.
Oh,
That
I
was
will
really
be happy to
wonderful.
share it with you. You can use it
Yeah,
wherever you like.
that
So
was
I'm
wonderful.
so
Thank
happy you're here. This is such an important topic and so much of why I built my company. So this is just the best moment. So you know how this show goes. I always start it the same way. Would you kindly share a little bit of your story?
Okay, I will. Now, 37 years, as you mentioned, means it could be too long. So I will, since you mentioned, I will start somewhere I don't usually, but you mentioned it. I have been married for 44 years. You comment on family.
Congratulations.
Good. 8 grandkids, number nine coming. Very, very exciting to me. Now, more to work stuff. So I started actually after college, I worked at P&G for 6 years and then went to business school, worked at Boston Consulting Group as a summer intern and got a full-time offer. And let me just tell you three stories around the beginning of my career there that had a lot of influence on me. First off, when I got the offer, first offer, a professor at my business school, HBS, our business school, said, "Well, you won't survive there. You're not smart enough."
Oh,
Can you believe
how
that? That's what he
rude.
said to my face. I won't tell you his name. I think he's not alive anymore, so we'll park that for a minute. Then I got my full-time offer at the end of the summer. And the partner that gave me the offer said, "Well, Joe, you're going to do really well here." And sorry, he said, "We speak up here." And this is BCG 37 years ago,
Yeah.
pure strategy guys, really, and it was one woman at the time. We use big words. You talk at the client level, you really connect with them. So there was a little bit of a negative there, and I didn't use, but there was a,
I think.
but there was a message, which was you're able to connect with people and that. And then I'll tell one quick story, and then I'll just wrap that up. About 3 years in, I was going to open the Washington office with my friend, colleague, boss, and mentor. And I had already moved my family down to Washington from Boston. And this fellow, Steve, he and I were on a plane. We were flying up to Toronto to a client meeting. And I remember he leaned over and said, "Oh, Joe, I got to tell you, I got an offer to be the president of a company." And of course, my mind immediately goes, "Oh crap, I just moved my family. Like what,
Yeah, what is happening?
I won't say all the swear. Yeah, that's a good one. What's happening
Yeah.
here?"
No, you can swear. It's totally fine.
Yeah. He said, "No, no, no, don't worry. I've decided not to take it. It's an incredible offer. And there's lots of puts and takes, but I've committed to you and Sarah. You've moved. We are going to open this office. We're going to make it great." So,
Wow.
that was a powerful moment. And if you take all three of those, one, when someone says you're quote unquote not good enough,
Yeah.
you you can wilt or you can find your own way to say, "Okay, what the heck?" and fight back inside. Two, though, is find your quote unquote superpower. And it's a silly word,
Mhm.
but it's a great word. And
Oh, it's not a silly word. I love
I
it.
know, no, just but for me, it was one of the messages what ties with the smart enough. Okay, maybe I ain't the smartest guy in that room,
Yeah.
but I can collaborate, I can team, I can work with
Mm.
people better than a lot of them, and that will make a difference. And then finally, of course, from a leadership perspective, what an example of somebody giving of themselves for me. Now, he reminded me 30 years later, well, it was more than one reason, Joe, but it was, but also the importance of having someone else's back.
Yeah.
you having people's back through your career.
That's
So you mentioned 37 years, all that stuff you talked about, and it was a great run. But a lot of those lessons 37 years ago helped me evolve to the person, the leader I tried to be over the years.
Yeah, I love your leadership style, and I love how poignant that moment was, where he said, I committed to you and I'm staying with you. When I think back to my career, those leaders that believed in me, and I'll never forget, I had one leader, the first time she promoted me twice, but the first time she said, "So, how do you want to run the business?" And I was like, Me? You're asking me? Really? I'm always told how to run the business. You actually want to know what I think? And she's like, you've been in the trenches, you know. So yeah, how do you want to run it? And I got so excited and I felt such a tailwind of support that I in turn gave that to my team and was like, we have choices, we have
Right.
options, and we have a leader who believes in us. Let's go. What do you want to do? And they were like, oh my gosh, this is a new world. So, can we dive a little into that subject of how meaningful it is when a leader says, I've got your back, or I believe in your talent? I know you've experienced this a whole lot, probably on both sides. So, share some thoughts.
Well, I mean, okay, I'll say the first thing, and the leader did say, "How do you want to drive the business or run the business?" So she wanted you to run it. So,
Yeah.
one thing we all have to forget, because you and I are going to talk a lot about what someone says, well, is this just about being nice?
Mm,
No, as a leader, you got to get results,
hmm.
or guess what? You won't have the job. So that's the
Oh, yeah.
premise. So anyone wants to say, "Oh, Joe Davis and Lindsay are just trying to be nice."
Nope.
Yeah, sure we are, but we're trying to deliver. But then you go to what you said, and I had a colleague, a friend of mine, a guy named Joaquin Duato, who's CEO of Johnson and Johnson, and he said to me, he said, Joe, the sooner you understand, well, the way he put it, a lot of us, the sooner you understand it's not all about you and move past yourself,
Yeah.
unlock the potential and the human capabilities were used of all those on your team, the sooner you will get to the greatest
Hell
outcomes.
yeah. I
And
love that.
that's, and it's interesting, I'll say, when you're a new manager, maybe managing three people, you might be able to do it all yourself. Because you could stay up all night if they goof up and get it done. Now that's not healthy, but that's a different point. Once you've got 10, or in Joaquin's case, I don't know, whatever, 100,000, you can't do it yourself.
No.
And the sooner you learn that, which is not as easy at 25 or 32 even, a lot easier at 60 or something,
Yeah.
the sooner you're really going to tap into that talent. And
Yeah.
I
I
think
love
what
that.
the story you told, I mean, there's 2 points there. Like you've got it, she has confidence, and you go figure it out. And then you immediately said you turned to your team.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it by yourself. You brought your team in right away and said, okay, how do we do this?
Well, and the best lesson of that was having skin in the game. If I gave my team skin in the game and they could put their thumbprint on the ideas, on the bold moves, we all owned it and we shared that culture. And I will say that leader who did that, she created some of the best culture I've ever experienced. And it was because she treated all of her leaders that way. She gave us so much autonomy and a lot of trust that we were going to do what we said we were going to do. And we would bend over backwards for her. And one of the beautiful things that came out of that is not only it's an incredible culture of trust, we had so much fun and we became really good friends. And I think leaders sometimes think, oh, I can't be friends with my team. And we have an audience question at the end to talk about that. But that was just proof to me that absolutely that can happen. And when you have to
It's
deliver those tough messages, they land a lot differently. So yeah,
I was just thinking also what you said, I believe one of the traits to be the type of leader you and I are talking about is, and every person I interviewed, every executive said the same thing, is asking questions,
yeah,
asking questions. And think about what she said. How do you run it? That was a question.
yeah,
How do we run the business? And asking questions of your people, well, it's smart as heck, first off, because you may think you have all the answers, you don't. There is
sure,
something that Lindsay knows that I don't know, that if I knew, we'd be better off.
100%.
But well, equally importantly, it shows huge respect.
Yeah,
As you said, you were excited. Your team was excited. What? You care about what I think? You want to know what I think we ought to do?
yeah,
Now, not saying who has the right answers when you ask these questions. There's another quote I love. I don't know why I'm on the J&J theme, but Alex Gorski CEO of J&J, I've heard him speak once, and he said, your job of the leader is not to have the best answer in the room, it's to ensure the best answer comes out of the room.
Mm.
That's very powerful, you
Yeah,
know?
that's true. That's true. But you have to create a space where people feel like they're allowed to do the job they were hired for. They're not going to get in trouble for a bad idea, and that, diversity of thought is welcome. All right, so let's transition to one of my favorite topics, which is feedback.
Okay.
And I know that whenever you say, "Hey, can I share some feedback?" it is never good. So it's you'll never give that intro if it's good feedback. If it's good feedback, you're just going to come right out and say
I'm
it.
talking,
So
yeah.
yeah. So when someone says that, usually the hackles come up and people are like, "Oh God, what's coming?" And depending on your relationship with your leader, that can be a scary moment. So talk about your perspective on feedback.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because we could talk for a while. I'm going to tell a story again. I like
I love
stories.
stories. Yes, this is
I
just how I
was
talk, so it's great.
24, 25, I don't know, 2 years into P&G, and I was on a management track. There's also sales guys who are going to be salespeople forever.
Mhm.
Well, unless they quit, but that's all they went. And I was got promoted 2 years in. That's the way it is, and had three people working for me. I don't know. They seemed like old guys to me. They're 40. I was 25, so I seemed pretty old. And I remember I'd ride with them every 2 weeks. I'd never say a thing because I was petrified. To your point, I didn't even say "Hey, I got something for." I didn't say anything.
Uh-huh.
And then it came time for the annual review, and I wrote down everything this person I thought he should do better
Oof.
from the 2 years of the year of observations. And I started launching into it. And I got about, I don't know, a minute in. And he says, his name is Rich. He said, Rick, Joe, what the hell? You ride with me every 2 weeks and you've never told me anything. What? I mean, and all I can, I just now remember freezing. Like, what do you say? It's 20. I was scared then and I was more scared. Like, oh my God,
Yeah.
what a powerful lesson. And it was funny because I was afraid to give him feedback, but he was like, what the hell? You're right with me. Tell me what you see.
Yeah, we're in the car together.
I mean,
Yeah.
you might, sure, you're a young whippersnapper, but yes, there's something that I'm not catching.
Yeah.
So it was a very powerful lesson. Actually, when he left, my boss said, never again write a review, on a side point, where they don't know every word that's going to be on
That's right.
that paper. So, but the bigger point there is, I was just afraid.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting to me. He was sitting there waiting for me to give him feedback. Now he wasn't asking because what the hell?
Yeah.
So I do think to your point, it's so, so powerful. And now, I both started with the having your back and team with people. I mean, if you developed, it's not even a relationship, but it developed a relationship of respect.
Yeah.
If your people really believe you want them to thrive, to be better, to unlock all the human potential or traits they have, as Joaquin said, then you can give almost any feedback almost any time. I mean, if someone really has a bad day, don't go kick them at that moment. Maybe you be thoughtful, but usually do it in the moment. And if you see something right away, you tell them right away. I'll tell you one other story. I had a young colleague. Well, I thought he was young. He was 30. We presented to the C-suite at a meeting. He said the word like all the time, every other.
Mm.
And you say that when you're 16, you don't say it when you're 30 or 12, whatever. So afterwards, the client leaves the room, and there's the CEO and his team. And I said, Alex, in front of my whole team, how old are you? He said, I'm 30. I said, I never heard a 30-year-old say like so much. You got to cut the likes. And he told me later he was mortified. I said that right in front of everybody. He said, but I never said like again a day in
Yep.
my life. It was
No.
gone that moment. And, of course, I was thinking, okay, this is going to mortify him, piss him off, scare him. But I want to scare this word out of him because
Yeah.
he was,
Well, otherwise, it's a gentle bit of feedback, and maybe it'll work. And he will never forget that moment, and he'll never
no,
say
no,
that
he was
again.
diminishing himself. No, and
Yeah.
that's, you say something more important on this feedback. I mean, a gentle bit of feedback. I think the main difficulty most of us have is either we're young and scared or whatever, maybe not young, but you're
Yeah.
scared, you're afraid, or you're worried about, oh, wow, if I tell Lindsay some feedback that she doesn't like, she's not gonna like me.
Yep.
You got it all wrong. It isn't
Yep.
about you, it's
No,
about them.
you're making them better. Yeah.
But it does take some work in the developing the relationship and the respect, and then understanding what they're good at, which takes some work. And and then of course, when you're giving feedback, if there's any superpowers they have and they can leverage to work on the things,
Mhm.
give them that counsel.
Mm, I
I
love
think
all
it's
that.
you hurt people a lot more. If I hadn't told that fellow, you know, I'm sure that CEO walked out and said, "What the hell, BCG? Who is this kid you have presenting?" I mean,
Yeah.
it couldn't have been helpful to him, and it wasn't probably helpful to us.
Well, and I don't think people know they even say it. And they're so worried about the concepts coming out clearly that they're just crutch words. It's an it's an
Right.
or you know what I mean, or those little phrases, and they just get in the way of the point. So your feedback was spot on, and I'm sure he never did it again.
No, 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 right. But the lesson was respect was built in the moment. That wasn't that harsh, but it was very in the moment.
Yeah,
I remember well, my mentor used to always, every time we walked out of a room, okay, let's debrief. And first off, he'd say, how did I do? Now, none
yeah.
of us, he was the boss. We didn't give, but it was nice of him. Then
Uh-huh.
he'd say, how do we felt as a group? And then he'd give us feedback. Now, he didn't give us private feedback in front of everybody, but we didn't leave the room or without right then and there debriefing. And what a great opportunity for feedback.
It's so important because everyone's hearing different things. And, you know, I love a postmortem after a sales call. And what I heard them say was this. And did you know the intel I had from this matched with what he said? Or, you know, whatever, having that connection, you all go out taking different messages away than what you just heard with your own ears. So that's a really smart way to debrief after a call. So let's flip the feedback coin to the generous coin. And you wrote this book called The Generous Leader. So let's just talk about generosity because to me, generosity is the my favorite style of leadership. And whenever you are, you know, kind and giving praise, that looks good on you. So talk about your philosophy around generosity and why it works.
Yep. Well, okay. I mean, it just ties to everything we've been saying, but I actually believe the best leaders, quote unquote, my use of the word generous, but you can use servant, you can use
Yeah,
so many words.
sure.
You know, what a leader like that person is they really they're giving of themselves without expectation of direct personal benefit, giving themselves freely so others can develop, grow, and thrive at their full potential.
Yeah,
And they really believe that. Now, the benefit to it, of course, if everyone's thriving at their full potential, the leader wins too. The
that's right.
organization does well, and so it is also selfish. But the minute the team knows it's selfish, it doesn't work so well.
No.
If you're really just trying to help them grow, that is what I think is a really exceptional leader. And this is, I'm not saying, first off, we said you have to get results. And I'm not saying you don't have to be a good manager. You still got to have deadlines, set plans, all these things, strategies. But I think the exceptional leaders go the step above and ensure that team is firing on all cylinders. Then everybody wins.
How do you connect the tough conversations with being a generous leader? Because when you're a leader, you have to have hard conversations. You have to give feedback. You have to give, you know, the company is moving in a different direction. We're changing our strategy. I'm going to have to lay people off, whatever. These are the responsibilities of being a leader. How has being a generous leader helped in those cases?
Well, okay, so first off, by definition, the generous leader, if they're helping others thrive and grow, would be direct and honest because
Yeah,
otherwise you'll get confused and you're not humming at your full potential by definition.
agreed.
But I think one thing, I argue a couple of things. I think, a really good leader connects personally and deeply as best they can with the team, which we can talk about. They're an incredible listener, which we did talk about. But they also bring in, you pick your word, but they bring in authenticity, honesty, vulnerability, whatever it is, it might vary. And I think, the way you ask that, if I think of during COVID, I mean, I talked to Scott Kirby, the CEO of United afterwards, and he's an incredible leader, a generous leader type. Got a tough job with, the airlines and everything. That's
Oh, yeah.
different. But he said when COVID hit, he was going to go out to the troops and say, I have no idea when we're going to fly again. And
Yeah.
his, see, you can't say that. You're the boss. You're supposed to have the answers. He said, what do you mean have the answers? I don't know. We're going to tell them we're going to fly in
We're
33
in
days.
uncharted territory. Yeah.
No, but his team was mortified. But he said, no, this is a time for honesty, authenticity. And, it's common. If you ever watch, related to that, the video of Arnie Sorensen, I don't know if you saw it, the Marriott CEO who was dying of cancer at the same
Mhm.
moment as COVID. And he's on there, his hair's bald he's bald from the
Radiation and chemo.
radiation and all that stuff. And he's talking about same thing. I'm not sure when the hotels are going to fill, but we're all here together. We're going to do our best. Sorry, I'm furloughing people. It was very
Yeah.
honest. very really authentic because he was also sick, but very powerful. So, to me, a generous leader, multiple traits, but a fundamental one is authentic and honest.
Yeah,
And, especially when the way you asked it, times are tough, or you have a hard message, that's the best time to be that way.
I
I'm
agree.
not saying be lost, be a loser, be a weenie. I'm not saying that stuff,
Mhm.
but I'm saying call it straight and be straight with your people. They're going to follow it to your point on following you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I saw it myself when I had to lay people off. And if you're consistently leading from your heart and you're consistently giving that feedback and asking the hard question of how can I be the best leader for you, when those hard decisions come, they land a little easier. And I know for me, I was really bad at reading scripts and they knew it wasn't my words. They could tell. They're like, and I would say, I'm gonna read you from a script. And they would be like, oh, okay. And then
The
it
legal
would,
side, HR side, just worse for it.
yeah, it would end with, I'm so sorry you have to do this. And I'm like, you're apologizing to me?
Right.
That's crazy. No, like, how can that even be? And they knew it was coming. They could tell.
Yeah.
So I do really think that when you're consistent that way and you're constantly generous and generosity, I think people confuse, like you were saying before, we're not saying just be a softie. We're saying, when you are praising people in public and in private, of like, hey guys, did you see how Jimmy did that earlier today? Jimmy, please tell the story of how you are connecting with your client because we could all learn from this. When you're putting him on a pedestal and explaining that what he did was great, number one, you're modeling behavior, but number two, everybody is going, well, I want my chance in the sun. I want a moment to be praised. And so everybody starts raising their game and they want a little bit of that shine. And doling that out is a gift of being a leader. So
It's free. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Just Bill, maybe we can make it short. I mean, a generous leader is want someone who makes sure their people thrive.
that's right.
So if they're underperforming, you got to push them up. That
Yeah.
may not be fun, but you're trying to make them thrive. So it's not all about just being nice. I
No.
love the story you said, 'cause the other thing I talk about is small acts, big impact, like you just, which is so easy. And of course, remembering somebody's birthday. No, I mean, you have to have it in the calendar or something, but say happy birthday, send an email.
Yeah.
Big deal. Or what, we all know how powerful it is if your boss sends you an email, hey, great job, congratulations. And if they actually copy the whole team, it's cool.
Oh,
They copy their boss, it's cool.
uh-huh.
One
It's
time I
so
was
cool.
being
So
interviewed
cool.
by somebody, and the woman, and she had her granddaughter was 24 or something, just a company, and she got an email that day from her boss, and they were all the granddaughter, the mother, and the interviewer woman. They were all talking about it all night at dinner. Everyone
Yeah.
was so excited. A little email took the person probably 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Now,
I think it was the CEO of Pepsi, um, PepsiCo at one point in time sent an email out to all of her senior executives' families, to say, and I mean personalized, to say how much their impact meant and how much the familial support meant to the company. And just like you said, everybody talked
they
about it
talked
at the
about
dinner
it.
table and felt better about the time away and the job that they were committing to. And it's such a powerful moment that most leaders don't recognize they have. So, um,
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I love that.
What, building on that, now that
Yeah.
that one takes work, but it's still not that hard. But if one of my colleagues told me once, she said, if I have a manager who, let's say on Thursday, she said, oh, I have a big weekend. My son's in a big soccer tournament. And then on Monday or Tuesday, the manager, all that person,
How was
hey,
it?
how was the soccer tournament?
Yeah.
How was soccer? 5 words. And she said, when that person asks me that, I'll follow them forever. Now, not really, but it's just,
Oh,
and all
it's
you
small,
get
but it means so
manager
much.
had to remember and then spend 90 seconds, had to listen, nothing. And this woman will follow him forever, kind of thing.
Well, and
So,
there's a simple trick that I learned from my friend Scott McGregor, and he's the best at this. So if he were to meet you and he would say, Joe, tell me about your wife, tell me about your family, he would write down every single name, how many grandkids, where you live, all that stuff, but he put it in his phone. And so anytime he's going to talk to you, he'd be like, how's so and so? And has the ninth grandchild arrived yet? And his ability to recall these little details, which people have no idea that it's already written down. They just think he remembers and they think it's so, so special and meaningful. It is so small, but it has such a big impact. So I love
I
that. All
I
right, so
have
let's take a, oh, go ahead.
no one. I have a very dear friend who's good at that. It's called my wife. She never forgets anything. Even
Oh, so
20
good.
years later, how was that? Anyway, but I like his tool. Just write it down or
Yeah,
remember.
put it in your phone and that way it's always there. All right, so let's take a short break and we'll come back in just a moment and we'll continue this conversation. So sit tight, everyone. If you like the stories you hear every week on this show, guess what? I have hundreds more from my nearly 30 years in the leadership trenches. And I don't just talk about building irresistible culture, I do it. You can bring me into Keynote, moderate your panels, or work directly with your leaders to drive material change. So let's roll up our sleeves, go out to heartbeatforhire.com, let's connect, and let's make some magic happen. Go lead with heart. Okay, welcome back, Joe. One of my favorite questions to ask, and you know you've listened to the show, is what inspires you?
What inspires me? Oh my. I think the most, as I reflect back now over the years, I can't remember what right inspired me in the moment when I was 35 or 40, but what does inspire me is when colleagues, friends, people that worked for me somewhere along the way tell me a story about how I said this or that, or spent a minute or answered that question. Often they'll say, I asked you a question, you always tell me straight, and it made a big difference in my life. And I mean, you call it legacy also, and I'm at a stage where that matters, but
Mm,
that's what inspires me more than anything is when someone kind of says, hey, thank you for being there for
yeah,
me
it
when
meant
I,
something. Well,
it's funny. I can think of my business successes, and they didn't even come into my mind when you asked that because they're
yeah,
fleeting. They're wonderful. They're wonderful, but they're fleeting. But
yeah.
knowing you trust a person isn't fleeting.
No, and you stole my next question, which is,
Uh,
what would you like your legacy to be? So you started it. So
uh,
anything to add?
well, it's funny because I'm now retired from BCG and have this book, which I'm trying to leverage into basically just giving more of myself and helping others who want to be helped to thrive at their full potential. Obviously, the context changes for me. I don't have a bunch of people working for me directly. So whether it can be through your show, through my book, through, engaging one-on-one with folks, I really want to continue to
Yeah.
make it and ensure others can thrive at their full potential. Just
Mm,
make and I for sure I'm doing with my not 8+ counting grandchildren. That's the
yes.
first place I will tell you.
Yes. Well, it's funny because I know a lot of leaders who parent differently than they lead. And I'm a mom of teenage twins, and I've caught myself doing things that I would never let one of my leaders do. And I'm like, okay, that was not very evolved. That was not very good. That was not the right way to talk to them. But then I had to come and eat some humble pie and say, hey, I didn't deliver that message very well. I'm sorry. This is what I was trying to say. And I don't care whether you're a child or you're a colleague or, you work for someone, when you have that humility and you say, I did it wrong and I'm trying to get better. There's a few people in the world that would be like, sorry, you suck. Like most
Very,
people are going to be pretty forgiving.
very rare.
So,
BPC is a very upward feedback process place. And when we get partners who have really bad feedback and they have to fix it, remember I used to tell them if I'd coach, I said, well, go tell the team you have bad feedback, tell them what you got wrong and ask them to help you. And but they tell them it's like, oh, you want me to help you? The whole thing changes. The team's
you
in
know,
with them.
I love that you brought that up because to me, those moments of apparent conflict or potential conflict create the biggest opportunity for a deeper relationship. And when people understand that, you almost kind of embrace it because it means like we've reached a new level. We've reached a new way to communicate. We've built a new level of trust, and that's really powerful. So I love when you can have those moments. So, what's next for Joe?
Well, I guess I'm now 6 months out of BCG, but as my wife has said, she's stunned that I've adjusted nicely. She
Oh,
couldn't
good.
believe yeah, believe it, actually adjust nicely. Anyway, so what's next for me is basically I'm going to continue to look for ways to give of myself, help others grow to their full potential, for sure with my family, and then with broader folks through speaking and through coaching as I can.
I
That's
love
probably
it. I love it.
the two simplest thing.
And how can people find you?
Well, you can find, I mean, easiest thing is go to LinkedIn and go onto the message. I actually read the messages, then
Nice.
I'll give you my email, communicate by email.
Perfect.
But I've got a website, joedavis.com, and
Perfect.
so, but that's the easiest
And
way.
we'll share all your socials in the show notes, but definitely connect with Joe. As you've heard, he is a wealth of information and my favorite kind of leader. So, guys, please connect with him, reach out to him if you're looking for a keynote. And, Joe, thank you so much for being such a fabulous guest. We're going to hang on tight because we've got an audience question coming up. But, Joe, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. I always learn from you, and this was wonderful.
Thank you, Lyndsay. It was great. I appreciate it.
All right. Hang tight, guys. Our audience question this week is so perfect for this show because we actually talked a little bit about it. But the question was, can I be friends with my team and still lead them effectively? Well, I'm going to just say, from my experience, of course you can. And there's a big difference in being well liked and being a good leader. If you are a good leader, like Joe and I just talked about, a generous leader, one who creates space for people to do the jobs they were hired for, you are going to earn trust very, very quickly. That trust will also turn into admiration. And if you are a good leader and you are interested and curious about your people, friendship will naturally evolve. I am still very close friends with a number of people that I've worked for. We still exchange Christmas cards. We see each other whenever we can. That is a sign of a great leader. So I would encourage those kinds of relationships. Now, one thing I will caution you to say is never use the words, we are a family. I was part of a culture where when someone said that, it was more of a mob style family, like, you will hire my daughter or you will hire my son and you will do things for the better of the business that you don't want to do. That is not what I mean. When you are creating a team of people that are inspired and feel like they have room to do great work, you will find friends without even trying. So, yes, I encourage that. It makes your life richer. So, being a generous leader, like Joe talked about, always looks good on you and will generally result in great friendships. And you will still be able to command the respect you need as a leader. I hope that helps. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Please go out, subscribe to the YouTube channel, share it with your friends. Look for us on Apple or Spotify. And a big thank you to our sponsor, as always. Have the best day and go lead with heart. Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.